breath of the desert dawn. The desert at 4 a.m. isn't just dark, it's a living, breathing weight that presses against your chest. I lie there on my side, my body curled on a thin, rough mat made of woven goat hair. The first thing I always notice is the smell. It's a sharp, earthy mix of stale campfire smoke, the musky scent of the camels tethered just yards away, and the dry, metallic tang of the cooling sand. Before the sun even hints at breaking the horizon, my eyes are wide open. In the silence of the pre-dawn, every tiny sound is magnified. I can hear the rhythmic, gravelly grinding of a camel's teeth as it chews its cud, and the soft, ghostly whistle of the wind as it catches the heavy folds of our black wool tents. My hand instinctively slides over to the hilt of my blade. It's not out of fear, but out of a 1,000-year-old habit. In these sands, your honor and your steel are the only things that truly belong to you. I push myself up, and my joints protest with a dry pop that sounds like a snapping twig in the stillness. The air inside the tent is stagnant, but the moment I pull back the heavy flap and step outside, the cold hits me like a bucket of ice water. It's a clean, biting chill that makes my lungs feel brittle. I look up, and the stars are so bright they look like holes poked in a velvet shroud, revealing a blinding light behind them. This is the time for Fajr, the dawn prayer. I move toward the water skins, my leather sandals making a soft sh-pat sound against the cooling earth. Water is more than just a drink here. It is the physical mercy of Allah. As I perform my ablutions, let the freezing water trickle down my forearms and over my face. I feel the crust of yesterday's dust and the lingering heaviness of sleep wash away. My skin tightens and my mind clears. I spread my prayer rug, facing toward the holy city, which lies hundreds of miles across a wasteland of fire and stone. Allahu Akbar. My voice is a low rasp in the vast emptiness, but it feels like it fills the entire world. When I press my forehead to the ground, I feel the grit of the sand and the underlying hardness of the rock. At this moment, I am not just a nomad, I am a thread in a massive, eternal tapestry. I pray for the strength of my tribe, for the safety of our livestock, and for the wisdom to find the hidden wells that keep us from the grave. As I rise, the horizon begins to bleed a deep, bruised purple. The silhouettes of the camels emerge from the gloom, looking like prehistoric giants. I can smell the first hints of a fire being coaxed to life, bitter brushwood smoke that stings the eyes but promises the warmth of a morning meal. My stomach growls, a reminder that I haven't eaten since the sun went down. But the discipline of the faith and the harshness of the desert have taught me that hunger is just a guest you learn to live with. I adjust my belt, feel the weight of my responsibilities, and prepare to face a day where the sun is both our greatest provider and our most relentless executioner. The sun's hammer and the long trek. By the time the sun is 2 hands high, the gentle colors of the morning have been scorched away, replaced by a blinding, washed-out white that hurts to look at. We're moving now. Breaking camp is a silent, coordinated dance that we've performed 1,000 times. There is no wasted breath. I haul the heavy wooden frame onto the back of my lead camel, feeling the coarse, oily fur beneath my palms and smelling the animal's thick, pungent sweat. The beast lets out a gurgling, protesting roar, spraying a bit of foam, but I speak to him in the low, guttural tongue of my father, and he settles. We're heading toward a wadi that supposedly held water after the last rare rains. If the rumors are wrong, the next 3 days will be a trial of blood and endurance. As we move, the heat becomes a physical entity. It's not just hot, it's a vibrating, shimmering wall that distorts the horizon until the mountains look like they are melting into the sky. I wrap my kufiya tight around my face, leaving only a slit for my eyes.
but the air I breathe is so hot it feels like it's searing the hair inside my nose. The smell of the caravan is overwhelming. The dry, dusty scent of the camels, the salty tang of human sweat, and the faint, sweet aroma of the few dates we have left in our pouches. Every step my camel takes sends a small puff of dust into the air, which hangs there, motionless in the stagnant heat. I watch the rhythmic sway of the beast's neck in front of me, letting the motion put me into a light trance. It's the only way to survive the midday hours, to withdraw into your own mind and leave the body to do its work. I find myself thinking about the stories the elders tell, about the great battles and the poets who could move men to tears with a single line. But mostly, I think about water. I imagine the way it feels to submerge my entire head in a cool pool, the way the droplets would hang on my beard like diamonds. My mouth is so dry that my tongue feels like a piece of old leather, and I can taste the fine silt that has managed to bypass my face covering. We pass a bleached skeleton of an oryx, half buried in a dune, a grim reminder of what happens when the desert decides you've had enough. There is no room for pride here. You realize very quickly that you are small, and the only thing that keeps you going is the man to your left and the man to your right.
We are bound by a code of honor that is thicker than blood. If a man's camel falters, we stop. If a man's water skin leaks, we share. To do anything less is to forfeit your soul. The sun is now directly overhead, a golden spike driven into the center of the world, and we push on, our shadows huddled beneath us like frightened animals seeking the only shade they can find. The politics of the well. We smell the water before we see it. It's not the smell of a fresh spring, but the heavy, damp, slightly sulfurous scent of a deep desert well, a mix of wet stone, old moss, and the faint rot of wind-blown debris. As we crest the final ridge, the Bir al-Maut well comes into view, its blackened stones standing like a fortress against the encroaching dunes. But we are not alone. A group from the Banu Harb tribe is already there, their camels crowded around the stone lip. I feel the tension ripple through our line like a physical shock. My hand goes back to my sword, and I see my cousins doing the same. In the old days, before the Prophet brought the light, this would have been a bloodbath. We would have fought for hours over who had the right to water their beasts first, leaving the sand stained red. I can smell the rival camp's fire. They are roasting a small desert hare, and the scent of charred meat makes my mouth water painfully. The air is thick with the sound of many camels, a chaotic symphony of grunts, bellows, and the splashing of water. I ride forward with our leader, my eyes locked on the men across the well. I can see the dust-caked lines in their faces and the way they grip their spears. They look as exhausted as we are, their eyes sunken and red-rimmed from the glare. We stop 10 paces away. The silence is absolute, save for the wind whistling through the rocks. "Assalamu alaikum," our leader says, his voice steady and heavy with authority. The leader of the other group hesitates, his eyes flickering over our numbers, before he finally nods and repeats the greeting. The tension doesn't vanish, but it shifts into a begrudging respect. We are brothers in faith now, even if our grandfathers were enemies. I dismount, my legs shaking slightly from the long ride. I walk to the well and take my turn at the rope. It's thick, encrusted with salt and grime, and it burns my calloused palms as I haul the heavy leather bucket up from the darkness. When it finally reaches the top, the water is cool and dark. I don't drink first. I pour it into the wooden trough for my camel. I watch the animal gulp it down, its throat moving in powerful rhythmic surges, and I feel a strange sense of satisfaction. My turn comes next. I plunge my face into the bucket, and for a second, the world disappears. The water tastes of earth and minerals, but it is the greatest luxury I have ever known. As I pull my head out of the water,
The cool wind hits my wet skin, sending a shiver down my spine that makes me feel truly alive for the first time all day. We settle in to wait, sharing small talk with the Banu Harb about the movements of the Roman traders to the north. We are no longer just raiders, we are a community, a nation being forged in the heat of the desert and the shared necessity of the well. The sun begins to dip, and the shadows of the rocks stretch out like long, dark fingers reaching across the sand, marking the end of another day of survival. The crimson horizon and the evening grace. The transition from day to night in the Hijaz is not a gentle fading, it is a violent, beautiful struggle. As the sun begins to drop towards the jagged teeth of the western mountains, the sky transforms into a bruised canvas of deep violet, burnt orange, and a red so thick it looks like spilled blood. I stand atop a shifting dune, my feet sinking into the fine silk-like grains that still hold the blistering heat of the noon hour. The wind has picked up, a dry, restless breeze that smells of parched stone and the faint, sweet scent of distant rain that likely will never reach us. This is the hour of Maghrib. I can hear the voice of our elder, his call to prayer rising above the low rumble of the settling caravan. It is a lonely, haunting sound that seems to vibrate through the very rocks beneath us. In this moment, the entire desert feels like a massive, open-air cathedral, and I'm just a speck of dust within it. I begin the dry ablution, the tayammum, since our water must be guarded like gold for the trek ahead. I press my palms into the clean, warm sand, feeling its gritty texture against my skin. I rub my hands together, then over my face and forearms. The sand acts as a purifier, not just of the body, but of the spirit. I feel the day's frustrations, the bickering over the grain bags, the stubbornness of a limping camel, the searing itch of the salt on my neck. All of it begins to drain away. I take my place in the long line of men. We stand shoulder to shoulder, our rough woolen cloaks brushing against one another. There is no king here, and there is no slave. There is only the breath in our lungs and the Creator who gave it to us. Allahu Akbar. As we bow, the scent of the cooling earth rises up to me, a damp mineral smell that only emerges when the sun stops beating it down. After the prayer, the world plunges into a deep, velvety blue. We return to the center of our small circle of tents. The fire is the heart of our nighttime world. I watch as my cousin tosses dried camel dung and scraps of desert scrub into the flames. The smoke is acrid and blue, stinging my eyes, but it's a welcoming sting. It smells of home, of safety, and of the bitter coffee that is already beginning to bubble in the long-necked brass pot. I sit on a striped rug with my legs crossed, feeling the intense heat of the fire on my face, while the skin on my back begins to chill from the desert's rapid cooling. We pass around a bowl of dried meat, salty, tough, and tasting of wood smoke. I chew it slowly, letting the juices wake up my senses. The elders begin to speak, their voices low and melodious as they recount the journeys of the companions and the miracles of the new faith. I look up at the stars, which are now beginning to pierce through the darkness like diamonds on a jeweler's cloth.
They are our map, our calendar, and our silent guardians. I feel a profound sense of peace, a quiet hum in my blood that tells me that despite the hardships of the day, I am exactly where I am meant to be under this infinite, watchful sky. The wrath of the Khamsin. The air went dead. That was the first sign. One moment there was a light, cooling breeze, and the next, the atmosphere became as stagnant as a tomb. I felt a sudden, heavy pressure in my ears, and the back of my neck began to prickle with an instinctive dread. I looked to the horizon and saw it, a wall of deep, sickly copper rising up to swallow the sun. The Khamsin was coming, the 50-day wind that carries the furnace breath of the deep interior.
The smell changed instantly. The scent of wood smoke was replaced by a dry, suffocating odor of ozone and ancient pulverized dust. "Down! Get the beasts down!" I roared, my voice cracking in the sudden, dry heat. I lunged for my lead camel, a massive, bad-tempered bull who was already groaning and tucking his head between his front legs. I forced him to the ground, my muscles straining as I threw my weight against his side to keep him from bolting in terror. Then the wind hit. It wasn't just air, it was a solid mass of grit and heat that slammed into us with the force of an ocean wave. The world vanished in a roar of orange sand. I pulled the heavy wool of my beast over my head and pressed my face against the camel's warm, hairy flank. The sound was deafening, a high-pitched shriek as the wind tore through the rock formations, mixed with the low, rhythmic thrumming of billions of sand grains, sandblasting everything in their path. I breathed through 3 layers of cloth, but even then, the air was so thick with dust it felt like I was inhaling liquid fire. My throat became raw in seconds. I could taste the grit between my teeth, feel it stinging my eyes, and find its way into every hidden fold of my clothing. The heat inside my makeshift wool cocoon became unbearable, damp, stifling sweat soaking through my tunic as the outside temperature skyrocketed. Hours passed, though it felt like years. In the darkness of the storm, my mind began to wander. I heard voices in the wind, high, ghostly wails that sounded like my mother calling my name, or the laughter of men I had seen fall in battle. I knew these were the tricks of the desert, the ghouls that haunt the high dunes, but the isolation was terrifying. I gripped the camel's lead rope until my knuckles turned white, whispering prayers into the rough fabric of my veil. I could feel the sand piling up against my back, burying me slowly under a warm, heavy blanket. The smell of the camel, oily fur, musk, and hot breath became my only reality, a tether to the physical world. I felt the sheer power of the earth, a force that doesn't care about your tribe, your wealth, or your dreams. It was a humbling, crushing weight that stripped away everything but the core of my soul. I lay there, a prisoner of the sand, waiting for the Creator to decide if I would see the stars again or become just another nameless mound in the shifting sea of the Hijaz. The silence of the aftermath. The silence that follows a great sandstorm is jarring than the roar of the wind itself. It is a heavy, ringing quiet that makes you feel as though you've gone deaf. I felt the weight of the sand shift as the wind finally died down to a whimpering breeze. I pushed upward, my muscles screaming in protest, and burst through the surface of the dune that had nearly become my grave. I stood up, shaking myself like a wet dog, sending a cloud of fine ochre dust into the air. The landscape had been completely rewritten. The dunes I had seen yesterday were gone, replaced by new, sharp-edged ridges that looked like the spine of some sleeping beast. The air was thick with a fine, suspended silt that turned the sun into a pale, ghostly disk, casting no shadows. It smelled of pulverized rock and something ancient, the scent of the deep earth brought to the surface. I looked around for my companions. One by one, gray, dust-covered figures began to emerge from the sand like ghosts rising on the day of judgment. We didn't speak. There were no words for the relief we felt. We moved towards each other with heavy, stumbling steps, checking for injuries and squinting through red, swollen eyes. I found our water skins. Thankfully, they were still lashed tight to the camels, though now they were buried under a foot of silt. I brushed the sand away from my lead camel's nostrils, and the beast gave a great shuddering sneeze, spraying my chest with foam. I laughed then, a dry, raspy sound that hurt my throat, but it was a victory. We had survived the desert's attempt to erase us. We began the slow work of digging out our gear, our hands moving with a new kind of urgency. The smell of the morning after the storm is strangely sterile. Everything has been scrubbed clean by the grit. I found a small pouch of dried figs that had survived the chaos, and as I bit into one, The burst of concentrated sugar felt like a miracle. I could taste the sunlight and the rain that had grown the fruit in some distant, peaceful oasis. We gathered what remained of our wood and started a small fire to boil water. As the blue smoke drifted up into the hazy sky, I felt a deep, pulsing sense of gratitude. My honor was intact, my brothers were alive, and my faith was the anchor that kept me from drifting away into the madness of the storm. I looked out over the new horizon, realizing that every day in this land is a gift that must be earned with sweat and blood. I straightened my back, felt the warmth of the sun beginning to return to my chilled limbs, and prepared to lead my people towards the next horizon, forever changed by the fury we had just endured. The spice road and the ghost of commerce. The horizon didn't just break, it shimmered and bled until a thin black line of swaying silhouettes emerged from the heat haze. It was a heavy caravan coming up from the incense ports of the south.
Long before I could see the faces of the men, I heard the rhythmic, metallic clank, clank, clank of the massive copper bells hanging from the lead camels. That sound is the heartbeat of the desert. It means news, it means trade, and it means life. I adjusted my sword belt, feeling the familiar salty grit of my own dried sweat scratching against my hips. My hand moved to the hilt, my thumb brushing the worn leather. In these sands, a meeting is a gamble. You are either a brother, a customer, or a target. My eyes, narrowed against the glare, scanned their formation, looking for the telltale glint of Byzantine steel or the posture of hired mercenaries. The smell hit us like a physical wall as the wind shifted. It was an intoxicating, suffocating cloud of scents that didn't belong in this barren wasteland. I breathed in deep, and my lungs were suddenly filled with the heavy, oily sweetness of raw musk and the sharp, resinous bite of frankincense. Mixed into this was the dry, dusty aroma of cinnamon bark and the stinging heat of crushed cloves leaking from the tightly sewn goatskin bundles. It was the smell of far-off empires, places with rivers that never run dry, and cities made of white marble. Underneath it all was the familiar, pungent stench of overworked camels and the sour, unwashed musk of men who hadn't seen a bath in 40 days. It was a dizzying, sensory assault that made my head swim after weeks of smelling nothing but sand and dry wind. We met in the shadow of two towering red cliffs, where the air was stagnant and heavy with the smell of sun-baked stone. The noise was a chaotic explosion, the groaning of overloaded beasts, the creak of heavy wooden pack frames, and the guttural shouting of merchants in a dozen different dialects. I saw their leader, a man draped in silks that had turned gray from the dust of the road. His beard was matted with salt, but his eyes were sharp as a hawk's. "Assalamu alaikum," he called out, his voice a gravelly rasp. That single phrase changed everything. The tension in my shoulders dropped, and the hands of my kinsmen moved away from their weapons. We were no longer potential enemies. We were a community bound by the new law of the Prophet. I walked among their animals, my sandals crunching on the gravel. I stopped near a camel carrying crates of Basra dates. The smell was so thick I could almost taste it, a deep, honeyed sweetness of fruit fermenting in its own sugars under the weight of the trek. A young slave boy, his skin ash-gray from exhaustion, handed me a handful of the sticky fruit. The texture was tacky against my fingers, and the flavor was an explosion of pure energy that made my blood tingle. We traded stories of dried-up wells and the rising power in Medina. We gave them directions to the hidden springs, and they gave us a small block of salt, white and crystalline as the mountain snows I've only heard of in poems. As they pulled away, leaving a lingering trail of spice in the air, I felt the immense scale of our world. We are the guardians of these veins of trade,
the warriors of the waste who hold the keys to the kingdom's wealth, the silent watch and the whispers of the past. The desert at night is not empty, it is crowded with the ghosts of everyone who died trying to cross it. My watch began when the moon was at its peak, casting a ghostly silver light that turned the dunes into frozen waves of pale silk. I sat on a high, jagged outcrop of flint, the cold of the rock seeping through my woolen trousers and biting into my skin. The smell of the night was sharp and sterile. It smelled of cooling minerals, the faint, bitter tang of the dying embers of our fire, and the musk of the huddled camels below. There was no moisture in the air, just a dry, biting chill that made every breath feel like a sip of ice water. My ears were tuned to the frequency of the silence, listening for the tiniest deviation in the rhythm of the waste. I could hear the world breathing. I heard the soft thud of a camel shifting its weight in the sand, the dry rustle of a desert viper moving through the scrub 100 yards away, and the eerie low-frequency hum that the dunes make when the temperature drops rapidly. The elders call it the singing of the sands, but to me, it sounded like a million tiny voices whispering the secrets of the jinn. I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the wind. I remembered my grandfather's tales of the days of ignorance, the Jahiliyyah, when we sacrificed to stone idols and lived only for the next raid. I could almost smell the old blood on these rocks, the iron scent of ancient tribal wars that lasted for generations over a single stolen horse or fouled spring. The stars above were so bright they seemed to pulse with a life of their own. I looked at the constellation of the Great Bear and the North Star, the silent guides that have led my people since the beginning. They are the map of the Creator, etched into the black velvet of the firmament. I reached into my pouch and felt my prayer beads, their smooth bone surfaces warmed by my touch. I began to recite the names of the Almighty, my voice a barely audible murmur against the vastness. Each word felt like a brick in a wall I was building between myself and the darkness. The fear of the unknown began to melt away, replaced by a profound sense of belonging. I wasn't just a man sitting on a rock. I was a sentinel of the faith, a protector of the sleeping brothers below me. Suddenly, the wind brought a new scent, the metallic tang of cold iron and the oily smell of horses. My body became a coiled spring. Bedouins ride camels for the trek, but raiders ride horses for the kill. I stayed perfectly still, my hand slowly moving to the hilt of my sword, my eyes scanning the base of a distant ridge where the shadows were the deepest. I held my breath, listening for a jingle of a bit or the heavy puff of a stallion. I caught a flicker of movement, a shadow that moved against the grain of the moonlight. I waited, my heart hammering against my ribs, ready to give the alarm. But the shadow resolved itself into a lone wolf, loping across the flats in search of a stray kid. I let out a long, slow breath, the tension leaving my body like a receding tide. I sat there until the first gray light of dawn began to erase the stars, a lone witness to the majesty of a world that belongs to no man, but only to the one who shaped the dust.
The emerald trap of the oasis. The smell of rotting palm fronds and stagnant water is the most beautiful scent in the world when your throat is lined with glass. We reached the oasis of Wadi al-Qura just as the sun was beginning to turn the sky into a furnace of molten gold. One moment there was nothing but the endless undulating orange of the dunes, and the next, a jagged tear in the earth revealed a hidden forest of deep, impossible green. The air changed instantly. It became heavy, thick with moisture that clung to my beard and made my skin feel slippery. It smelled of damp earth, the cloying sweetness of flowering acacia trees, and the fresh green scent of alfalfa. My camel surged forward,
his long neck reaching out, his nostrils flared to catch the molecules of water hidden behind the granite walls. I slid off my mount before he had even fully knelt, my feet hitting the soft, mud-cucked ground with a dull thud. The sensation of wet earth between my toes was a shock to my system. It felt like a luxury I didn't deserve. I walked toward the Aflach, the narrow irrigation channels that carved through the grove. The water was clear as a diamond and cold enough to make my teeth ache. I plunged my entire head into the stream, the roar of the water in my ears drowning out the world. I stayed under until my lungs screamed for air, and when I pulled back, the world was vivid, the colors sharpened by the moisture on my lashes. I drank until my stomach felt heavy, the taste of minerals and ancient stone filling my mouth. It was the taste of survival itself. But an oasis is a place of shadows and secrets. As I wiped the water from my eyes, I caught the scent of heavy, expensive perfumes and wood smoke, the smell of settled men who have forgotten the hardship of the deep waste. The local sheikh was approaching with his retinue, their robes clean and their bellies full. There was no warmth in his eyes, only the cold calculation of a man who owns the water. He spoke of a tax for our passage, a demand that violated the sacred laws of hospitality and the new decrees of the Ummah. The air grew tense, the sweet smell of the jasmine vines feeling like a noose. I looked at my brothers. Their hands were already on their belts, their faces hard and unforgiving. We'd crossed the fire of the desert to get here. We weren't about to be broken by a man who slept on silk. We refused his terms, standing our ground in the flickering shade of the palms. I felt the heat of the conflict rising, a different kind of heat than the sun, the heat of pride and righteous anger. The sheikh's guards moved closer, the smell of their oiled leather and cheap tobacco filling the space between us. I stood tall, my voice steady, as I reminded them of the judgment that awaits those who exploit the traveler. For a long moment, the only sound was the wind rattling the dry palm leaves overhead, sounding like the chattering of teeth. Finally, the sheikh spat on the ground and signaled for his men to step back. We had won this round, but I knew the night would be dangerous. I spent the evening cleaning my gear by the water's edge, the smell of the damp earth a constant reminder of why we fight. The beauty of the oasis was a trap, a test of our resolve. As I watched the fireflies dance among the trees, I realized that the desert is honest in its cruelty, but the oasis is where a man's soul is truly put to the fire. The horizon of a new world. The last night of our journey felt different from all the others. I stood at the very edge of the oasis, where the lush, damp green of the palms suddenly surrendered to the infinite, hungry orange of the deep desert. The air was caught in a tug-of-war between the two worlds. One moment it was heavy with the scent of wet earth and jasmine, and the next, a sharp, dry gust would bring the smell of parched stone and ancient dust. I looked out toward the east, where the sky was just beginning to turn a bruised, ghostly gray. My lead camel stood right beside me, his massive head resting near my shoulder. I could feel the rhythmic warmth of his breath against my arm, smelling of chewed clover and salt. We survived the storms, the thirst, and the jagged blades of our enemies. I felt a strange, quiet power humming in my blood, a realization that I was no longer the same man who had left the tents weeks ago. The smell of the early morning is the smell of a fresh start. It's a thin, crisp scent, like cold metal or a snapped reed. I watched as the camp behind me began to stir. I heard the low, melodic murmurs of my brothers waking up, the clinking of brass pots, and the first sharp crackle of a new fire. Then the scent of coffee started to drift through the trees, a thick, dark aroma of roasted beans crushed with green cardamom pods. That smell always clears the cobwebs from my mind. It's a spicy, honest scent that reminds me of why we endure these hardships. We are the pulse of this land. I walked over to the fire and took a small cup, the heat seeping through the metal into my calloused palms. We shared a final meal of hard, dry bread and a few shriveled dates, but to me, it tasted like a feast fit for a king. We ate in a comfortable silence, the kind earned only by men who have bled and sweated together under a merciless sun. I looked at the faces of my kinsmen in the flickering firelight. Their skin was like scorched leather, their eyes deep set and rimmed with the red dust of the road. But there was a new light in those eyes, a sense of purpose that stretched far beyond the borders of our tribal lands. We weren't just wandering anymore. We were building something that would outlast our names. The first ray of the sun finally cut through the haze, hitting the tops of the dunes and turning them into liquid gold. Allahu Akbar! The call to prayer rose up, blending with the rustle of the palm leaves and the distant cry of a desert hawk. It was a sound of absolute certainty. I felt the ground vibrate under my feet as we stood together, our shadows stretching out like long, dark spears towards the future. We loaded the last of our gear, the leather straps groaning under the tension. The smell of the dust kicked up by the camel's hooves was a familiar friend now. I knew that back home, I would soon smell the smoke of my own hearth and the sweet scent of my children's hair. But I knew that the desert would always be calling me back. It is a place that strips you down to your soul and leaves only what is true. I climbed onto my mount and looked back one last time as the oasis faded into a shimmering mirage. My heart was full, my honor was intact, and my path was as clear as the stars above. We rode out into the vast, open maw of the horizon, ready to face whatever the Creator had written for us, breathing in the eternal scent of freedom and the burning sand.